tout dit, vous êtes artiste avant plusieurs, dans le milieu artistique, donc c'est très génial. Par contre, dans différents domaines, donc on va vraiment pouvoir avoir des snippets de différents domaines artistiques. Déjà, avant de commencer, en fait, vraiment approfondir la question sur le colorisme, ça serait bien de le définir. Donc, si vous vouliez, si quelqu'un voulait définir, tout le monde peut répondre. Excusez-moi. Avant, juste, je vais expliquer très rapidement comment le panel va se dérouler. Donc, on va avoir un moment de discussion. Puis, en fait, à la fin, il y a 30 minutes prévues, 20-30 minutes prévues pour des questions. Donc, si vous avez des questions, notez-les, hold your thoughts, and we're going to get back to it at the end. Pour l'instant, là, on va vraiment faire comme discussion. Puis, les panélistes, vous pouvez répondre comme vous voulez. Puis, on va pouvoir aller comme ça. Donc, on parle de colorisme, ça serait bien de le définir. Donc, si vous pouviez donner une définition de qu'est-ce qu'est le colorisme, je trouve que c'est également important, en fait, qu'on parle de, peu importe l'enjeu, de le placer dans son contexte également, comme d'avoir une compréhension historique d'où ça vient, puis comment ça se témoigne maintenant, comment ça s'est transformé, puis ça continue de se témoigner. Donc, si vous pouviez donner une définition du colorisme, peut-être un très rapide 101, where does colorism from, what is colorism et tout. Voilà. Donc, qu'est-ce que le colorisme, tout ça vient?
I can do like a quick little definition. Mais en même temps, j'ai envie de faire comme, I just don't really want to get into like, this is not colorism 101. This is not what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, we're not kind of like trying to like define, like, on n'est pas en train ici de comme donner des définitions. Bah, je m'imagine, j'aimerais que on soit pas en train de donner des définitions et de dire que, OK, da. Mais je vais faire un petit quick for whoever, like, just like to keep up to date. Colorism, c'est juste, bah, le fait que people who are lighter skin, les gens qui ont une peau plus claire, sont considérés un petit peu sont plus valorisés dans la société, que ce soit au niveau du travail, que ce soit au niveau desirability, le désir, au niveau de comment les gens sont abordés, de comment les gens sont how they dealt with, like day to day, la compassion qu'on accorde aux gens qui sont plus clairs que les gens qui sont plus foncés, juste le fait qu'on voit les gens plus clairs comme plus humains, parce qu'on associe l'humanité à like, whiteness.
À la blancheur, ouais.
To whiteness. Et c'est juste, c'est ça. Being light is adjacent to being white. So that's just what it is. So I just would want to kind of like get to really like the nitty-gritty of what we're talking about, so we don't kind of like lurk and stay onto like definitions and like little small things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
yes,
Absolutely.
Yes.
Everything she said was absolutely correct. I think I just want to touch on a few notions that I've come across in terms of colorism, just so we have a basis of what we're going to address later on. So colorism obviously is the preferential, like the preference of lighter skinned people, and lighter skinned people having more privileges and being considered more desirable and more human. In a lot of instances, colorism has been traced back to serfdom, like back in like the kingdoms and stuff like that. When people were in the sun and they were working all day, they tended to be darker, and those who were of de la noblesse and who were like of royal blood were inside and powdered themselves constantly instead of showering. And that's some weird white people nonsense that we're not going to talk about today. And then when it comes to colorism as it relates to Black people, people know about house slaves versus field slaves. Field slaves were typically monoracial, dark skin, and house slaves were often the offspring of slave masters who sexually harassed their slaves and kind of not adopted, but obviously like had the lighter skinned slaves inside the house. You bring that down to the Jim Crow era of the one drop rule, where basically this rule was created to kind of divide how much humanity you were allowed to have. It's like, if you're a quarter Black, well, you only have 75% of human rights, like, you know, or if you're an octoroon, you only have these many amounts of rights. So if you were a white passing person and somebody found out that you were a quarter Black or an eighth Black, all of a sudden you were seen as less human, no matter what it is that you actually look like. And I find it interesting that today, now that Blackness is cool, hip with the kids, everybody wants that octoroon status.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd like to kind of delve into how we somehow subverted the intention of the Jim Crow era rules and what that means for monoracial dark-skinned people today.
Mm-hmm. Puis pour poursuivre sur ce que mes deux collègues ont dit, je trouve que c'est déjà là d'organiser, par Fruition, d'organiser ce genre de conversation, c'est vraiment important dans la communauté parce que la manière que je considère le colorisme, au dehors de sa définition, c'est aussi un des super pouvoirs du système d'oppression raciale dans lequel on vit, puis un des héritages de l'époque esclavagiste. Puis pourquoi je dis que c'est un des super pouvoirs, c'est que, tu sais, on le sait tous que faut diviser pour mieux régner, puis je trouve que c'est vraiment important parce que c'est souvent le colorisme est considéré, je trouve qu'on n'en parle pas assez déjà de base, qu'on n'en parle pas assez dans nos communautés, puis j'ai l'impression que c'est vraiment une opportunité de décrocher le colorisme du racisme parce que je trouve qu'il y a beaucoup, c'est beaucoup perçu comme étant un sous-traitant ou une sous-catégorie du racisme, tandis que c'est vraiment comme un enjeu en soi, un enjeu vraiment très important qui prend beaucoup de place, puis que moi, je considère déjà d'autant plus important vu que ça touche nos communautés à nous. C'est vraiment nous en lien entre nous, puis au-delà de le lien avec mais pas au-delà avec le lien avec la suprématie blanche parce que c'est un héritage comme direct de ça, mais c'est pas en rapport à nous, personnes noires, en rapport à la personne blanche, c'est vraiment un rapport nous entre nous. Fait que je vais juste dire ça avant que... C'est ça.
Oui, et je voulais juste rapidement, parce que je suis d'accord avec tout le monde, I don't want to like spend too much time on this. I too just want to like dive into the discussion. I guess one thing that I'd like to mention is that colorism is an economy, and within this economy, whiteness is currency and Blackness is a commodity. And so whiteness is meant to always be capable of purchasing Blackness, and Blackness in this way of framing reality is not supposed to be capable of purchasing or enacting agency upon anything else. And so a lot of our interpersonal conflicts arise when people who inhabit unambiguously Black bodies want to assert their agency, because the economy and the world order that we live in exist because that agency is denied. And then, yes, if we go further, like into the slave trade, and even beyond like US context, the ownership of Blackness in modernity is part of what defines whiteness or what defines non-Blackness. And I think it's very important to situate non-Blackness in this conversation because Black folks, non-Black folks of color, and white folks are perpetuators of colorism. And so, yes, of course, this is a problem within our own community. And at the same time, this is a problem that is perpetuated by racialized folks across the board against themselves and each other and against Black people. Because a global anti-Blackness and a force of misogynoir has to continue to exist in order for global capitalism to exist. Because global capitalism exists only through the control of the Black woman, the Black femme, and the Black gender non-conforming person, and the communities of care that we craft, and where the offspring from those communities are redirected throughout empire. So where do they work? Who do they work for? Who does their labor belong to? So what we're really talking about when we talk about colorism is who captures our labor, who capitalizes off of it, and who is even capable of recognizing it as labor. Because Blackness in global capitalism is understood to be labor to which all people who are not dark-skinned are entitled to.
Now you said that.
You just took us like...
I know it's Friday, but I feel like you took us to church. Damn.
Yeah, exact.
Ben là, c'est bon, on peut tout laisser à Néné. Néné, c'est bon. OK.
You said a Capricorn's in the house.
Well, par contre, ça amène en fait très bien la prochaine question. Justement, lorsqu'on parle de ce pouvoir économique, ce pouvoir comme capitaliste qui est également engrainé dans la question du colorisme. Mais en fait, comment ça se traduit justement ces dynamiques coloristes, ces dynamiques raciales, puis, en fait, dans vos milieux justement, puis par rapport même aux dynamiques de pouvoir, c'est ça, dans les milieux, comment ça affecte vos opportunités? Puis j'y vais, mais comme on parle vraiment des personnes comme des personnes darker skins, in general, black dark skin. Donc, c'est ça. Comment est-ce que ça se traduit, justement, si on pousse cette question au niveau de pouvoir économique puis des opportunités?
Moi, je dirais, en tant que musicienne, de toute évidence, lighter is better in a lot of contexts. And more importantly, sorry, my septum is acting up. Lighter is more palatable. It's more commercial.
Yeah, définitivement.
It's and depending on the kind of music that you do, it kind of allows other people more access to that music, to that art, and to that genre as a whole. So obviously, if you take Strange Fruits, for example, we didn't actually technically start out as a hip hop group, but because we came from a youth center that predominantly deals in hip hop music, that's kind of how the studio not marketed us, but kind of put us out into the public sphere. And so at first we weren't really taking that seriously because we didn't have that many rap songs. And oftentimes I ask myself what the reaction would be if we were all dark-skinned, because I am the only dark-skinned monoracial person in the group. And so what that has translated to in my experience in the group is that oftentimes I find myself treading a line where it's like, I don't want to come off as too aggressive, right? Because it's like, then you would play into the aggressive dark skin best friend trope that you see a lot in 90s comedies. But also in the group and outside of the group, I've found myself playing the mammy role by accident, completely by accident, where it's like, where I would feel like I needed to take a younger person or a white person or a lighter person under my wing and be like, oh, don't worry about it, honey. I got you. I can protect you. I can do all the hard, gritty stuff so that you don't feel like you're doing too much. And it's impacted me in my work because it has made me feel limited in how much help I can actually allow myself to feel entitled to, right? It's like if I ask too much, if my standards are too high, if I impose myself too much, I go from mammy to scary dark-skinned Black person very quickly. For anybody that doesn't understand the context of how our band has come to be. And if you know anything about the group, like you have me, who's kind of like the oldest, the big sister role. You have like one who's more kind of like the shy, cutesy one. And then you have one who's like much more soulful, much more like, I don't want to say sensual, but like it would kind of, I feel like the stereotypes would be subverted if we were all dark skinned. The shy, cutesy one would go from being the cute baby to the dark-skinned girl with an attitude problem. Like, oh, why isn't she social? Why doesn't she want to talk to anybody? Then you have the other one who might be hypersexualized if they were a dark-skinned person as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that has played a lot into the success that Strange Fruits has had in the hip-hop sphere, because it's like we have subverted so many stereotypes about what like a rapper is supposed to look like, act like, and sound like, and that may have propelled us into relative popularity on the outside, but on the inside it has caused a lot of dissonance in how we conduct our work and how freely we are able to like allow ourselves to be ourselves without feeling like we're imposing on somebody else's freedom or their idea of us. Well, that's for me personally. So I don't know about anybody else.
Excuse-moi, je vais pas t'interrompre, mais j'aimerais rebondir sur des trucs que tu as dit, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de trucs que tu as mentionnés qui résonnent pour moi. Puis en fait, moi, je suis dans un milieu complètement différent. Tu sais, moi, je suis dans le milieu du théâtre ou de la télévision, puis c'est vraiment complexe comment ça joue puis comment ça peut se transposer sur mes opportunités, parce que mes opportunités en tant que comédienne et actrice qui va passer des auditions, comment je pourrais dire ça? Il y a vraiment une limite à mon pouvoir par rapport à pas les opportunités, mais les trucs que je peux avoir, parce que déjà là, de base, le monde du casting, c'est très physique, c'est très de première vue. Puis ce qui est vraiment particulier, c'est que dans mon domaine, je suis dans le domaine qui... la télévision a toujours joué un rôle de véhicule, et pour la plupart des gens d'éducation populaire. Donc, je veux pas, c'est souvent par la télévision que les images stéréotypées vont être véhiculées, mais pas souvent, genre c'est dans la télévision en grande majeure partie du temps. Fait que moi, je me ramasse beaucoup à être dans le milieu de ce qui m'est projeté. Puis aussi, comment, mettons, du casting va se faire. La TV au Québec, genre, please, exactement. Merci, Naika. Fait que c'est vraiment complexe de me faire une tête par rapport à comment le colorisme joue un impact sur mes opportunités. Puis je pense que c'est vraiment... parce que, veux pas, il y a une image qui va être envoyé. Donc, ça va être quelque chose qu'on veut représenter. On va se dire, OK, par exemple, the light-skinned one is more genre l'avant-garde ou whatever, tu sais, dans la manière que ça va être casté, tu sais.
Like they'll be the protagonist.
Exactly. C'est exactement à ça que je m'en venais. As a black person, the light-skinned one, je réalise, as a black person dans le domaine de la télévision, a un éventail, que je pourrais dire, un éventail de rôles ou un éventail de types de personnages plus wide que the dark skin one, dans le sens où on se dit que dans le milieu de la télévision, les choses évoluent, etc., etc. Puis souvent, je me ramasse devant quelque chose, puis je me dis, does it? Parce que si, mettons, je prends certains personnages, je prends plusieurs personnages de séries, puis là, je parle de façon générale, fait qu'on peut genre multiplier fois 20 pour la télévision québécoise, tu sais, quel type de personnage va être interprété par quel type d'actrice avec quel type de complexion? Puis, tu sais, c'est comme un ongoing process, parce que, tu sais, moi, dans un contexte de... Je peux pas savoir si... oui, j'ai pas eu le rôle parce que je suis dark skin. Je peux pas savoir, tu sais. Je peux ne pas avoir le rôle pour tellement de raisons, mais je peux aussi poser une observation de quel genre de rôle est offert à qui et quel type de personne a quel type de rôle de manière... Quel type de personnage va... Excusez, je cherche mes mots là, parce que j'essaie de vraiment bien exprimer ce que je veux dire. Dans le sens où OK, je recommence. Il y a des types de personnages que tu peux voir le même type de casting revenir. Fait que c'est vraiment de faire cette observation-là. Puis honnêtement, c'est une observation que j'ai commencé relativement récemment à faire, puis que j'invite tout le monde à faire, de juste regarder quel type de personnage en soi et quel type de casting qui rentre dans ce personnage-là, tu sais, genre la fille noire frivole ou whatever, genre comme j'ai mentionné tantôt, avant-garde qui représente comme la diversité, whatever. What type of black girl is she? Juste d'un point de vue physique, tu sais, c'est quoi sa complexion, c'est quoi son, tu sais, c'est quoi sa teinte de peau et tout, tandis que, you know, the strong black woman from the whatever, the hood, or peu importe, là, qui l'a à la dure et blablabla, c'est quel type de personne noire que tu vas voir jouer ce personnage-là, tu sais. Mettons, si tu prends Dear White People, puis tu prends... Si tu prends Dear White People, puis tu prends How to Get Away with Murder, they're both black. Mais comme, si on switchait, genre, si on switchait les personnages, si on switchait pas les acteurs, là, parce qu'on s'entend que Viola Davis, elle peut pas jouer. Non, mais vous comprenez ce que je veux dire, là? Si on switchait les deux, tu sais, ce serait quoi le narratif qu'on apporterait, tu sais? Puis je trouve ça vraiment... Ce qui est vraiment complexe, c'est comme je mentionnais plutôt qu'on définissait un peu c'est quoi le colorisme, c'est que, tu sais, d'où je disais l'importance d'en parler, c'est puis de créer ce genre de sorte de discussion, c'est pour ça aussi, tu sais. C'est quoi les questions qu'on se pose? C'est quoi les observations qu'on fait? Puis de réaliser à quel point le narratif, même si, mettons, la télé veut se dire comme inclusif et blablabla, ou juste, mettons, OD. J'ai un trip OD, là, excusez-moi, là, whatever. Combien de fois on a vu des personnes noires? On en a vu plein des personnes noires. Plein. Mais combien de fois on a vu des personnes noires dark skin? Comme télé-réalité, tu sais. Mais, ces personnes-là représentent la diversité. Fait que est-ce qu'elles représentent vraiment la diversité ou elles viennent boucher un genre de trou, puis un genre de, tu sais, c'est une genre de case, puis on se dit, ces personnes-là vont représenter la communauté noire, mais tu sais, vu qu'elles sont à la télé, genre, il y a quand même un certain contrôle du narratif. Je sais pas si je me suis éloignée de la question, là, mais...
Non, du tout.
C'est parti, là! Ben ça, c'est vraiment comme personnellement dans le domaine de la télévision, de ce que j'observe, là.
Puis en fait, j'ai juste chip, parce que comme ça rentre parfaitement en fait dans les conversations, puis donc j'ai laissé Kim puis Néné continuer, mais j'ai juste justement la question qui allait suivre. En fait, lorsqu'on parle justement de white passing puis de black fishing, donc comme cette dynamique aussi, genre, parce que là, on l'aborde déjà en répondant à la question. Donc, si vous voulez aussi aller sur cette question, toucher là-dessus, puis on pourra l'approfondir également, mais si vous voulez toucher là-dessus également, parce que c'est effectivement dans le...
Écoute, je voulais juste parler par rapport à... Ben, je vais sûrement toucher sur ça aussi. Je vais essayer de faire un peu court. Parce que moi, j'allais dire que le fait que tu as parlé de musique et toi, tu as parlé de television. J'ai grandi en regardant, I think like a lot of people, j'ai grandi en regardant genre like music videos, you know what I mean? Like music videos were my thing when I was like growing up. Et pour moi, genre, je peux vraiment genre relier mon my awareness to the fact that like being dark skinned was like not necessarily a good thing. À genre, je sais pas moi, genre peut-être quand j'avais 7, 8 ans, 9 ans, en regardant des vidéos.
Baby.
And like learning from like the media that, because I consumed a lot of media when I was a young child. But it's just like from the media that I was consuming was telling me from the start that like, I was like, okay, c'est subtil. Bah, je trouve maintenant que c'est vraiment très, très flagrant, mais avant, c'était un peu subtil. Maintenant, c'est vraiment très flagrant. Genre, c'est très, très, très flagrant. It's like, the norm is like passing the paperback test. You know what I mean? That's what the norm is. But like, I was kind of just like, I was like, it's kind of weird that like, there's all these like men that like are dark skinned and they're all like in the media, but like when it comes to women, it's always like a shade like lighter. If it's dark, it's always a shade lighter than. You know what I mean? I noticed that from a young age. Et genre, c'était des choses que genre, j'ai engrainé, j'ai compris, j'ai internalisé moi-même, and I was like, okay, there is definitely something in our society that tells me that like being like a woman or being like a feminine person whatsoever, it is best for you to be lighter than darker. You know what I mean? Et genre, c'est genre, dans la famille, genre, c'est très normalisé, genre, des commentaires de « Oh, t'es très vraiment dark skin » ou whatever, Des commentaires genre qui n'ont rien à voir avec just who you are as a person, but just like the color of skin, and you're like, girl, what? Like, why are you even talking to me about that? Like, why are you even bringing up like what my skin looks like? Okay. But like, I learned that through like media. Et genre dans mon domaine, like I use like a lot of media, and I think like the art that I make is like a lot of like video and like visual and shit like that. And I think that it's very important for me to like reclaim like places of kind of just like media places, kind of just like creating visuals that like to me are not seen, that I don't really see or that I don't really like encounter. And like it also goes with like how I support media. Like I make it a point to like very specifically people who are dark skinned, you know what I mean? Like in a very obnoxious way. Genre like I dead ass like tell people like I'm not like supporting this person because they're light skinned. And like that's just like for me a way to kind of just like
recalibrate.
Kind of like rebalance shit, because it's like, well, like I don't support you, but like you're not really losing anything because you still got something. And it goes back to like what you were saying, Mag, like about like the fact that like dark-skinned people are seen or perceived a certain way automatically just because they're dark-skinned, but like if they're light-skinned and have the same attitude, they are seen like a way that it's like kinder, you know what I mean? And that's for me, that's just like what it is. It's like, I'm not gonna demonize you because I know what it means to be demonized, but what I can do is I'm not going to add onto this like perceived kind of goodness that you have built unknowingly. I'm assuming, I know unknowingly, that you have built just because of your proximity to whiteness. You know what I mean? And that goes back to like what like Shanice was like bringing up in the comments, and she said something along the lines of like people who are like the term white passing, right? Like what does it mean for someone to pass as white, but like claim blackness because they have like black people in their family, you know what I mean? And for me, I'm just kind of like, yeah, like la seule chose que moi je peux faire, c'est genre de dire que comme, okay, like I'm not gonna argue with you that you're black, like I'm not gonna take that away from you, but like I'm not going to like stand here and be like, okay, like I'm going to like believe and just like claim that like all you got just because you worked for it. No. I'm not gonna perpetuate that lie for you. I like, you can have all the fucking things that like come with like all the glory of like being close to whiteness, but what I'm not gonna do is add on to this like pile of like, you know, kind of very like, yeah, like white supremacist like agenda of just like uplifting people who are the closest to whiteness. And that's what it is when it comes to like this like tricky way like of like people who you don't really want to hurt feelings, and you're kind of just like, okay, like, okay baby,
Mais ça me fait... Je peux-tu embarquer?
Fine. It's like, we can do this all day, all night if you want to. You know what I mean? We can do this all day, all night, because I am Black too, sis. We can do this all day, all night. But what I'm not going to do is like sit here and pretend that you don't look like what you look like, because nobody
say that.
Like what I look like.
No, but say that though.
Yes.
No, but say that though.
Définitivement.
So I'm not going to pretend that you don't look like what you look like.
Mais c'est pour vrai comme 100%. Néné, est-ce que tu voulais parler ou tu fais juste chill dans
I feel
le
like
chat?
Néné got some shit to say.
Ouais, Néné dans le chat. OK, fait tu sais, pour vrai, tout ce que tu as dit, Kim, à 100%, puis je vais comme dive en même temps à la question que Fiacon avait dit.
Je pense que Néné allait te parler, though.
Ah, ben vas-y! Mais oui, vas-y, si tu veux parler. Mais oui.
Did you do it like... Sorry. Go.
Oh non, vas-y, qu'est-ce que tu allais dire?
Non, en fait, parce que j'ai cru te voir réagir. So I was like, wait, yeah, I think...
Je suis en train de rire. Mais j'allais dire que, genre, compte tenu du temps qui reste, je pense que je vais essayer de répondre, genre, aux questions généralement tout ensemble. Parce que tout est relié de toute manière.
Oh, je suis déjà 7 heures.
C'est ça, guys.
Oui, pour laisser le temps aux autres personnes de nous poser des questions.
Yeah.
OK, oui, donc il y avait la question de comme c'est quoi notre expérience dans nos environnements, genre professionnels, etc. La question de, you know, like white passing folks or like black fishing folks. Après ça, la question d'après was going to be like in our relationships. And then after that, how we deconstruct colorism. I'm just trying to be like, let's do it all so we get to the...
honestly, well, you can do that, but like if we don't go through all the questions, we don't go through all the questions, and this is just a part 2.
Okay,
but you can also,
amazing.
because yeah, it's a lot of like, it's a lot of topics too, but yeah, okay, you can.
Yeah. Well, I would like to say something, and I hope that, you know, given the energy that I'm feeling in the chat, people receive this with open arms. Because yes, to address what it means to be a darker skinned Black person, as we mentioned throughout this conversation, is to have people feel entitled to both your presence and your labor. And unfortunately, we weren't able to like receive, or at least I haven't seen everything in the chat, but we weren't able to receive introductions from people who identified as dark-skinned in the chat. And several people said that they are eager to learn. And I'm grateful that you are eager to learn. And at the same time, I'm here to remind you that colorism as an economy trains you to assume that this is a learning experience. When in fact, in order for you to learn, you would actually have to engage in a process of meditation and ask yourself how you've contributed to the situations that are being shared right now. Because the purpose of this panel is to provide a cathartic space for queer dark-skinned people. And yes, we are doing this in public because we're hoping that our kin will gather virtually with us and participate in this conversation with us. This, however, is not an educational panel. This is not a space to teach people how to treat dark-skinned people, because that is a lifelong journey. And that cannot be the burden of dark-skinned people. And I think that on the token of how we deconstruct colorism and how we create spaces in which we can care for each other as dark-skinned people, it is in the prioritization of ourselves, in the prioritization, wow, that's a hard word for me today, it's been a long day, that we are able to craft those spaces and identify who we feel comfortable inviting into them. Because in everything that's been shared, you've been able to notice that we deal with this shit in our families. We deal with this shit in our friend circles. We deal with this in organizing. We deal with this at our job. And so all of our lives are actually kind of a process of recovery and of figuring out how to imagine a future in which we are valorized and loved and cared for rather than consumed, because the anti-Blackness and the anti-darkness are so pervasive. So to speak to my own, for example, professional experience, I work in music on a more like administrative side. I work in organizing and I work in arts. And in order for me to have access to like financial capital, I've had to spend my whole life learning how to craft my identity as someone who, yes, professionally I'm a facilitator, but just by virtue of being a dark-skinned person living in a white settler colony, I've had to adopt the role of the facilitator and the pacifier to be accepted in spaces that were not exclusively occupied by dark-skinned people. Because if I adopt a role outside of that role of facilitation, outside of that role of pacifying, I'm understood to be doing too much, to be asking for too much.
Say that though. No, but say that
to not know my place and to be uppity. And so I'm just like urging everybody to consider.
Uppity, elle a
like,
dit le mot.
Non, mais c'est ça le mot pour vrai.
You know that that's what it is. You know that that's what it is. You know that is what it is.
Because they don't look at you like, look at this uppity ass Negro. Because
they look at look at this uppity ass Negro who doesn't know their place. You know, who has come in here. And ultimately, most of the time in a professional sense, if you want to do anything for yourself, it's considered uppity because
puis,
when you're a dark-skinned person... Oh, vas-y, oui.
Non, mais c'est fou parce que parce que tout ce que tu dis, je vais faire une analogie, je vais faire un tour à l'exemple que j'avais donné plus tôt par rapport à si tu prends le personnage de Dear White People puis le personnage de How to Get Away with Murder, à quel point tout ce que tu viens de dire, si tu prends juste les deux personnages, ça s'applique de la même manière. Comment, exemple, le personnage de Annalise Keating en tant que femme dark skin noire qui a prendre la place, qui a du pouvoir, comment elle est perçue, puis comment, déjà là, comment elle est, how she is portrayed, comment elle est perçue, comment les gens interagissent avec elle, comparativement à, j'ai oublié ce qu'est le nom du personnage principal dans Dear White People, dans comment, ce qu'elle fait, puis comment c'est perçu comme étant, encore une fois, comme je disais, avant-gardiste, comme acteur, actrice de changement, tandis que Annalise Keating, de l'autre côté, tu sais, elle est vue justement as uppity, like the black negro, genre qui que la tête passe pas entre le cadre, puis qui vient de blabla. Fait que c'est juste comme, c'est fou parce que je suis juste genre, oui, néné, t'as tout dit, mais c'est parce que je le... Tu sais, comme je disais que je commençais à peine à faire ces observations-là, mais juste en écoutant ce que tu dis, c'est tellement clair. It's just clear. Genre, les gens pensent qu'ils sont subtils, mettons, dans les productions, de comment ils... Tu sais, dans le changement, comme s'il y avait du changement, mais c'est pas subtil du tout. Parce que quand tu t'assois 30 secondes pour, justement, y penser, puis, mettons, en ayant les réflexions qu'on a aujourd'hui, genre, tu peux tout le spot tellement rapidement, puis je sais pas si tu voulais ajouter autre chose, Néné?
Ouais, ben au fait, je voulais juste dire quelque chose, au fait, par rapport à la culture pop et les représentations de comme, la noirceur. Et au fait, je pense qu'il y a deux choses qui se passent quand ils mettent genre des personnes light skin dans des rôles principaux. Non, c'est un rôle, donc des rôles principaux. Désolée, c'est très difficile de parler aujourd'hui.
Oh
très, très difficile.
No one cares about Panelist language. I don't speak and I'm half Senegalese. Like,
moi, là, j'ai été dans un petit lycée français, là.
Moi aussi, j'ai...
Et puis, ces gens-là, ils m'ont colonisé, ils m'ont harcelé, et me voici aujourd'hui. Mais, essentiellement, c'est juste un rappel que dans l'imaginaire de la mondialisation, la personne comme mixed race existe, dans leur version du futur, mais la personne dark-skin n'existe pas dans le futur. Et donc, parce que la culture pop nous permet d'imaginer notre futur and kind of to propel us into that future, characters that embody any kind of blackness will always have some kind of a mixed or diluted blackness. Because first of all, that allows writers, producers, directors to center whiteness around the reality of this character and to always have this character be relegated to blackness. And it also allows them to justify the perpetual disappearance of dark-skinned people in the present.
Nah, but
And
let me
tell
you something. When you have a point, finish your point, because I have something to say about that.
But like, no, I mean, all that I'm saying is like, I'm just agreeing with what's being said. And I think that pop culture is the most important site of inquiry, because pop culture is the most accessible space in which stories are told about our lives. And I think that it's very telling what Kim was saying, for example, the music videos that we grow up watching and the messages that they send about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be femme, what it means to be dark-skinned. The fiction that we consume, you know, in comedies, like in television shows and sitcoms or in films, what are the roles that people who have our bodies are always playing? The people who have bodies that are similar to ours are perpetually disappearing in pop culture, perpetually. Whether it's like the dark-skinned video vixen who gets pushed aside because the light-skinned girl or the white girl with the fat ass shows up on screen and they're like, ooh, that's what we really like, that's what we really wanted. Whether it's the dark-skinned person who gets killed first in the horror movie, whether it's the dark-skinned girl who is the best friend in the rom-com and who is no longer there when she has helped like fulfill her role as a mythical Negro who is supposed to lead the main character to their quest and to like their emotional reality. Whether it's the person who's playing the role of the mommy and then once the person feels self-actualized and therapized, they let go. We are supposed to be in this role of perpetual disappearance because, and I think that in part, this is why it's so important for there to be Black and like particularly like dark-skinned Black collaboration, coalescence, and solidarity with Indigenous folks on Turtle Island, because so many of the pop culture narratives about Indigenous folks across Turtle Island are about disappearance and are about like these fake narratives of self-destruction that allow other people to absorb us in stories where they are destructing us. And it's okay because our destruction and our death is perceived as inevitable. So what I would urge, and I'm saying this just because I see that there's a lot of people in the chat who are not dark-skinned, who are here now. So I would urge you to think about the ways in which you think of dark-skinned people as perpetually disappearing. And if you too have participated in this narrative of the future as a space that is predominantly embodied by mixed race people, and what you think that narrative actually means. And if in fact you are a mixed race person and your parents have told you that your body is the body of the future, what was being said there? What happens in that relationship between your parents? What is happening in that exchange between your Black parent and your non-Black parent, that both of them are invested in a future in which the bodies of your dark-skinned relatives do not exist? And how do you every day wake up and counter that narrative?
Mais tu sais, je pense qu'avec ce que Nana vient de dire, on peut, tu sais, comprendre et se dire que le colorisme, moi j'irais jusqu'à dire que le colorisme fait partie des héritages, de generational trauma, d'héritage qu'on a reçu dans la communauté, dans les communautés. Puis aussi, ce que je trouve important avec le sujet du colorisme, c'est à quel point c'est internalisé. Puis à quel point c'est passé, oui, on a beaucoup parlé des médias, on a beaucoup parlé de genre, tu sais, la télévision, l'industrie de la musique et tout, mais tu sais, moi, j'ai grandi avec ma mère qui me racontait comment elle, c'est la plus dark skin de la famille. Ma grand-mère est light skin, mon oncle, ma tante sont light skin. Puis elle a grandi avec du colorisme, genre vraiment dur, là, de comme, regarde-là, elle est pas aussi belle qu'une telle, elle est pas aussi belle qu'une autre telle, elle est pas, etc., etc. Puis, tu sais, moi, j'ai grandi en allant chez ma grand-mère, puis en voyant, tu sais, les produits pour éclaircir la peau. Pour éclaircir la peau, qui est une toute autre conversation en soi. Si on embarque là-dedans, on va avoir fini à minuit. Puis, tu sais, je me suis fait dire... Puis, honnêtement, genre, I know I'm dark skin, but I don't consider myself... Like, je suis pas la plus dark. Je suis pas la plus dark, fait que je sais que mon expérience personnelle n'est pas la même que plusieurs personnes. Puis... Tu sais, moi, j'ai grandi aussi avec les « reste pas longtemps au soleil » ou le monde qui disait à ma mère « fais attention pour pas, sinon tu vas trop bronzer », blablabla. Puis, tu sais, ça a été un truc à déconstruire. Puis, tu sais, il y a eu beaucoup... Ça a eu un impact parce que on a mentionné, tu sais, comment ça se présente dans le milieu professionnel. On n'a pas encore abordé comment ça se présente dans le milieu personnel, tu sais. Puis, comment moi, je me perçois par rapport à l'héritage que j'ai reçu, ancré dans le colonialisme, dans le colorisme, comme l'espace. Puis c'est fou parce que j'en parlais cette semaine avec une de mes amies, Lourdeni, qui est sur le chat. Allô, Lourdeni. Que, cette question-là de comment le colorisme a un impact sur ma vie relationnelle, je m'étais jamais vraiment posé la question jusqu'à ce que je me pose sur cette question-là. Puis ça m'a fait réaliser à quel point c'est sournois. Pour revenir un peu à ce que je disais plutôt, à quel point, on parle pas assez de colorisme, que le colorisme est souvent confondu ou associé avec le racisme. Puis j'ai réalisé que c'est pas aussi cash quand je suis dans un groupe de personnes blanches que quand je suis dans un groupe de personnes qui ont la peau plus claire que moi. Mais juste de faire le travail d'observer c'est quoi l'espace que je me permets de prendre, comment cet héritage a un impact sur comment je vais naviguer, comment je vais naviguer le monde, c'est quoi comment je vais genre m'imposer. Puis dans mes relations interpersonnelles, il y a beaucoup de projections qui m'est faite. Puis surtout avec comme mes amis gars, puis mes amis blancs aussi, mes amis gars blancs, puis de vraiment comme, genre, être témoin de, genre, leur perception de c'est quoi la négritude, tu sais, puis de vraiment recevoir la projection de leur compréhension de ce qu'eux ont ingéré comme éducation, puis un truc que je trouve vraiment important de mentionner quand on parle de colorisme, puis je pense que c'est ça qui fait en sorte que le colorisme peut être vraiment comme difficile à aborder, c'est que, like, black comes in different shades. So as our experience with racism et la négrophobie. Puis ça, c'est important de se le rappeler. T'sais, on parle beaucoup, surtout dans le milieu féministe, on parle beaucoup d'intersectionnalité, mais je trouve qu'on ne parle pas assez d'intersectionnalité dans les intersectionnalités entre les oppressions et les privilèges. Dans le sens que c'est pas parce que tu es light skin que tu vas pas vivre de négrophobie, mais c'est pas parce que tu vis de la négrophobie que tu n'as pas de privilèges parce que tu es light skin, tu sais. Puis ça, je trouve qu'il manque énormément de ça dans la conversation. Puis aussi, gars, on va pas se mentir, là, more you light, plus tu te rapproches du blanc, plus tu te rapproches des standards de beauté, standards de beauté
eurocentristes.
Merci, c'est pas le mot que je cherchais, mais ça va faire l'affaire. Puis plus tu as de la valeur, fait que oui, avoir la peau plus claire, tu as des privilèges, mais c'est aussi une question de se responsabiliser par rapport à ces privilèges-là. Puis de dire que tu as des privilèges, ça veut pas dire que tu vis pas de racisme, que tu vis pas de négrophobie, tu sais. Sauf que tu vas pas vivre la même que moi, je vais pas vivre la même que toi. Puis aussi, tu sais, il y a tellement de trucs qui peuvent entrer en compte dans comment on va vivre la négrophobie qu'on vit. Mais si on prend juste straight up skin color, skin tone, oui, tu as des privilèges, puis oui, c'est important de les prendre, puis oui, c'est important d'en parler, puis non, tu vas pas naviguer le monde de la même manière que moi, tu sais. Mais ça enlève absolument rien à ton expérience. Puis, tu sais, mettons, je me permets de dire ça, mais tu sais, mettons, je regarde Max puis Kim, puis je sais que mon expérience n'est certainement pas la même que celle de Max puis de Kim. Puis, je sais que, mettons, à côté d'elle, je peux paraître comme étant, genre... Tu sais, je sais que je peux... Mettons, si on nous prend, nous deux ou nous trois, dans une même opportunité, je suis capable de faire le bout de chemin de comme, OK, ça se peut très bien que j'ai plus de chance vers cette opportunité-là à cause que je suis plus pâle. Puis, autant que c'est important de réfléchir, c'est important de le dire à voix haute aussi. Puis c'est pour ça que, c'est pour ça que je le dis, puis c'est pour ça que je le fais, puis c'est pour ça que je trouve aussi... Non! Excusez, mon chat fait de la merde. Non, 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 non. Non, 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 non.
Oh no.
Mais
je suis désolée, je m'excuse.
Sur ce même sujet-là,
Avant
je suis stressée pour le chat, je suis stressée pour le chat.
Néné, avant que tu ne continues, before I forget my point.
Je vais juste dire quelque chose real quick.
Vas-y.
Oui. Non, vas-y.
Non, parce que je voulais toucher sur le fait que tu parlais de la disparition, si tu veux, de la noirceur, parce que people who conflate mixed babies as the future, as if, Brazilian kids aren't facing racism in the slums just like anywhere else in the world. Je pense que ça relie franchement à la prochaine question, ce qui est how do you navigate colorism in the queer community? On a parlé du fait que le plus clair que tu es, the more humanity you're given, but also the more light-skinned you are, the more associated to femininity you are. So the fact that in the queer community we subvert gender expectations so much, it makes for a very interesting dynamic. So for example, in the cis heteronormative Black community, light-skinned girls are preferable and light-skinned men are roasted for being too pussy or whatever, and then dark-skinned dudes, they're like the rough riders, they're the hood niggas, they're all this, they're all that, and then dark-skinned women are either hypersexualized, called cockroaches, or relegated to mammies. Now you take that into the queer community, for example, and this plays as much as it does in pop culture as it does in real life. Typically, when people talk about the LGBTQ community during, the pinkwashing phase of every single corporate organization in June and July, the face of the queer future is typically a white, AFAB, thin, able-bodied person with like a septum piercing and purple hair, right? C'est la même chose dans la non, am I lying?
Ça. Non, mais c'est tellement ça.
Okay,
c'est tellement ça.
Maintenant, chez les Noirs, par exemple, I feel like when you're a dark-skinned queer person, your gender presentation is way more limited than when you're a light skin. When you're a dark-skinned queer person, you're expected to either be hyper feminine or you want to be a nigga. There's really few instances where, like, for example, a light-skinned person can be more androgynous. They can be light-skinned and masculine and still be taken seriously as a stud because it's like, oh, you're light-skinned, so you're less threatening and still kind of reminiscent of femininity. But because also you're light-skinned, you're closer to humanity, so you're given a wider spectrum of things that you can be as a person and how you express yourself. Whereas with a dark-skinned queer person, like me, for example, right? Like I am cis, but I don't necessarily present hyper feminine or hyper masculine, but I still feel super invisible because I'm not a typecast. You see what I mean? Light-skinned people have fewer typecasts because they're allowed to be more things than dark-skinned people is the observation that I've made personally. And I think it's the same for
oui.
for masculine folks as well. Like if a guy is gay, but he's light skinned, it's like, like whatever, like that makes sense because he's light skinned, whatever. But if he's dark skinned and femme and gay, he's probably more likely to get his ass kicked in the street, you know? And I feel like the observation is the same when you look at the victims of like transmisogynistic homicides, right? Most of the time it's always going to be a dark-skinned Black trans woman because some idiot in the street thinks that person is not a woman, and because they're dark, the expectation is so much higher for them to be either completely one thing to the point that they quote unquote pass, or not. And the minute that there's any suspicion, the insecurity comes in, the violent tendencies come in, and then that's it. So I think I'd like to hear more about what the panelists and obviously the people in the comments think about what gender expression means for dark-skinned people versus what it means for light-skinned people, because I feel like I have fewer options, right?
I'm just gonna before, because we're gonna indeed move to on va passer à la période de questions, mais juste avant ça, en fait, je veux quand même, en fait, on va peut-être, excusez-moi, juste parce que comme tu viens d'amener le point aussi des autres personnes, je veux juste mettre, on va peut-être faire comme un dernier tour, si vous avez comme des derniers trucs que vous voulez dire. Je suis désolée, Macy, est-ce que tu peux mute? Please. J'essaie de le faire moi-même, mais j'arrive pas for some reason. Merci. Donc, c'est ça, en fait. Je vais juste vous laisser comme dernier tour de table, dernier propos que vous voulez dire. Puis ensuite, on va pouvoir passer à la période de questions. Il y a des questions qui ont été mises dans le chat. I have so much, like, j'ai vraiment la difficulté à follow up avec les Zoom chats, comme it goes so fast and then it's really hard to see what has been said before. So, il y en a peut-être que je vais skip, mais bon, il y a déjà des questions qui ont été posées. Si vous voulez comme les reposer pendant la période de questions, si vous voyez que j'ai skip parce que je n'ai pas revu la question, voilà. Sinon, je vais laisser les panélistes comme dernier mot de conclusion.
I already know how I wanted to conclude this talk, so I'll go first. The main reason white people are getting away with blackfishing is because we are okay with the idea that Blackness comes with specific cues that can be mimicked. Very much like what Nene said, whiteness is currency, Blackness is a commodity, meaning anybody can pick it up off the shelf, put it on their head, start speaking AAVE like it's nobody's business, and all of a sudden you're Black. You're not Black because you speak Ebonics. Stop. Don't. No, I'm serious. Just because you're Black doesn't mean you have to speak Ebonics. We all know that one Black person that sounds weird as fuck saying the N-word. You can say it, that doesn't mean you have to. And the idea that you need to speak in Ebonics, or the need that you need to roll your neck or snap your fingers to assert your own Blackness is an issue. We have to talk about how we define our Blackness in our community, how we gatekeep it in a way that makes sense, that doesn't stereotype our own, so that other light-skinned, white-passing, or otherwise simply non-Black people think that if I act this way, they will believe that I am Black.
Can I also just say quickly, nothing is just for white. You don't speak white. You don't speak like a white person. C'est pas parce que t'aimes la nature que you're white. C'est pas parce que whatever. OK? Parce que je voulais juste dire ça. Merci. Continue, Max.
Mag, were you done with your comments?
Yeah, just briefly, just to sum it all up, like there are a lot of light-skinned people, a lot of white-passing people that I know. One last anecdote, for example, I went to school with a white-passing person back in high school who did not speak English, who had some texture in their hair, but nobody knew they were Black. All of a sudden, as soon as they started a rap career, they want to start speaking Ebonics. That's an issue. Some people might know who I'm talking about. That's irrelevant. I'm saying don't start upping the Black just to prove that you are Black. If you are Black, we'll know. If you navigate the world as Black, if your parents are Black, you're Black. if you think that you have to start saying nigga, nigga this, nigga that, like just to prove a point, that's a you problem. You got to do some soul searching because I'm not going to do it for you. That's it.
For that.
That's it.
Nene, last word. I'm gonna have to limit y'all to just like go, Nene.
Okay, I'm gonna try to be super brief. I love everything that's being said. I just want to speak on how anti-Blackness and colorism also intersect with fat phobia, and how that limits people's ability to perceive dark-skinned people's genders.
Say it.
And so I feel like it has to be highlighted that there is a certain privilege to being dark-skinned, and also benefits from thin privilege. And it's easier for me to have my masculine energy publicly recognized than if my body were otherwise, right? And I think it's because there is such a profound antagonization of dark-skinned femininity, because it is at the root of the production of capitalism, of capital under capitalism, because the dark-skinned Black woman, like the dark-skinned cis-het Black woman under capitalism, produces the offspring to populate the slave quarters and to enrich the non-Black families.
Say that.
And so there is a very profound disdain in everybody's psyche, because there's a particular torment that is born out of needing to own that person's body and needing to own everything that springs from that person's body. And inevitably, throughout history, particularly when we think of like the Hottentot Venus and how the bodies of specific dark-skinned Black women, particularly those from the West African coast, were put on display in European trade shows, in American like world fairs, etc., as a spectacle. There is a specific hatred that is geared towards that body, because under capitalism, that body holds the secret to everything you want, and yet you will never embody it. And so there's a very intense desire to be able to name, to be able to confine, and to be able to define that body. And I think that Black people who do not embody thin privilege have this energy projected onto them. And if Blackness is thought to be a condition of inescapability, to be Black, to be dark-skinned, and to also be those two things and not to embody thin privilege, is to be relegated to a further space of inescapability where global capitalism wants to decide what they're going to do with you in our affective, emotional, gendered, and sexualized economies.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, for real.
I'm gonna keep it real.
Kim?
Yeah, very quick. I just want to say, like, I just want to say, just like, that masculinizing, like, darkness, stop seeing darkness as, like, inherently masculine, and, like, as, like, inherently something that's, like, meant to be used and to, you know, for labor, just like period. And like, and I just like want to say, like, in the grand scheme of things, I think that like cis Black men or like the biggest like perpetuator of like colorism, I think that like all of us are responsible for it, but like I think that like cis Black men in most cases are not, or the most responsible for it. And I just like want to like challenge like people who are like not dark skinned, like who are like in this places to like, I don't know what you're gonna do, I don't know what you need to do, but just like be conscious of the fact that like I think that like someone mentioned something about like light-skinned women who are enablers of like colorism by virtue of like associating themselves with like colorist like Black men, and that's a real thing. Like that's a very really like very real fact. And I just like I felt that like that's something that like people should like really sit down and like think about and stop doing that shit. Like stop like I think like it's really important. I think someone mentioned about I think it was Miriam who said something about how like colorism like affects like your relationships, like your just like your personal relationships and shit like that. And that's a real thing too. Like when you just like when you're hanging out with someone and like you realize that like they've only been dating like light-skinned people, that's a really fucking weird thing. You know what I mean? That's a really weird thing to do. There's no such thing as like preference. There's only just like weird like colonialism, like kind of like learned patterns, you know what I mean? Like that's what it is. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Myriam.
Honnêtement, les derniers mots avant d'ouvrir le Q&A, je veux juste dire merci vraiment à tout le monde parce que autant que j'ai vraiment appris beaucoup puis c'était pendant cette soirée-là, puis c'était vraiment le fun de vous entendre et je me trouve choyée d'avoir été choisie pour faire partie de cette magnifique brochette. Voilà.
So wholesome.
Aussi,
Amazing.
okay, so
Go. OK, non. Parfait. Donc, encore une fois, mais vraiment merci pour ces échanges. On va ouvrir, en plus, ça commence déjà sur le chat, like it's on fire, I really love it. On va ouvrir pour les questions. Il y avait une question de Lourdeny qui a été posée. On va commencer avec celle-là. Puis par la suite, si vous avez des questions, vous pouvez les mettre sur le chat. En fait, je pense que ça va être beaucoup plus facile à gérer. Posez vos questions sur le chat. I'll navigate through it, find them. Ouais, c'est ça. Puis on va terminer vers 8h15. Donc, on a quand même un petit 45 minutes de questions qu'on peut...
good enough.
Et tout. Donc, première question. Je vais lire les mots de Lourdeny. Donc, j'ai 2 questions. Of course, none of you all can answer, so it's really up. Ma première question est pour Mimi. Myriam, sorry. Te considères-tu dark skin ou non-ambiguous black? Et ma seconde est pour le groupe at large. Selon vous, comment des femmes light skin ou not dark skin nourrissent le colorisme internalisé des hommes noirs foncés? L'avez-vous déjà témoigné?
Ben, pour la première question, je me suis toujours considérée genre dans les débuts de palette dark skin, si je peux dire ça comme ça. Parce que aussi, tu sais, comme j'expliquais tantôt, ma grand-mère, puis mon oncle, puis ma tante sont super light. Genre quasiment, like they look mixed race, but they aren't. Fait que c'est sûr que peut-être que d'autres personnes comme... n'approuveraient pas de ma réponse, mais il y a aussi l'aspect que comme dans la famille dans laquelle j'ai grandi, je fais partie des plus foncés aussi, tu sais. So, mettons que tu as un shadowmètre, je me mettrais je me considère comme
genre
étant...
un palette comme à Home Depot ou un truc.
Exactement, c'est ça l'image, c'est ça l'image. Je me mettrais dans les débuts, là. I do identify as black, but like, tu sais, c'est ça. Dark as black, as dark skin, excusez.
Oh, I was about to say, are we having another coming out du genre Dolezal ou un truc? I too identify as a Negro American.
I too.
I
too am a niglet.
Niglet?
Wow. La deuxième question, peux-tu me rappeler la deuxième question?
La deuxième question pour le groupe at large, selon vous, comment des femmes light skin, je pense en plus ça a déjà un peu été abordé, mais justement, comment des femmes light skin ou not dark skin, ou qui ne sont pas justement dark skin, nourrissent le colorisme internalisé des hommes noirs foncés, et l'avez-vous déjà témoigné? Or like, like we say homme noir, but like, because like
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be also just like, but no, let's keep it the question like this.
I think que d'un point de vue relationnel et intime, it all depends on how, like, ça va sonner simplet, but it all depends on how you talk about the other. Dans la vie de tous les jours, comment tu peux influencer ou renforcer des notions léguées par un système d'oppression personnellement de personnes dans ton entourage. I think c'est vraiment par rapport à quel point tu es capable de te positionner, de comprendre ta position et aussi comment tu te poses par rapport à l'autre. L'autre ici étant a dark-skinned woman. Parce que c'est facile de se dire que c'est quelque chose de social. C'est absolument quelque chose de social, puis c'est absolument quelque chose qui se retrouve dans l'éducation populaire, mais il y a beaucoup, c'est extrêmement internalisé, puis il y a beaucoup de travail intérieur à faire. Puis je considère que tout, tu sais, ça peut grandement partir de comment tu parles de. Comment tu te positionnes. Genre, si tu te positionnes des femmes noires, si tu parles de femmes noires, de quelle manière tu parles de ces femmes noires-là? Si dans la manière que tu verbalises tes choses, puis tu te poses par rapport à, dans ce que tu dis, de quelle façon tu te poses? Est-ce que tu parles de la femme noire que pour te comparer, mais te comparer de fonction à dire que tu es meilleur, que you're looking better, that you make a better partner because black women, blah, 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 dark-skinned women, blah, blah, blah. Tout dépend de... Puis aussi, ouais, c'est ça. De mon point de vue, c'est ça que je dirais.
Yeah. And justement, j'hésitais un peu, en guillemets, parce que cette question, on peut aussi l'élargir quand on parle de... Parce que là, c'est vraiment d'une perspective, like, cis women towards black men, but we can also, like, on peut sortir cette question-là vraiment comme l'ancrer dans, quand on parle de queer relationship, like queer romantic or like affective relationship. Donc, juste ce point-là. Puis Mag, Néné, Kim, si vous voulez rajouter quelque chose par rapport à la question. If you have other questions, people, feel free to put it in the chat. On les rend.
Juste avant de léguer la parole, il y a aussi l'aspect du silence, comme de confronter, de passer sous silence certaines choses. Tu sais, si mettons, je vais juste de penser à ça, si mettons dans ta relation avec ton ou tes partenaires, tu sais, est-ce que tu vas condone certaines choses que la personne va dire? Est-ce que tu vas rien dire? Genre, je trouve que c'est important de se permettre de light skin ou pas light skin, mais surtout as a light skin person, je pense que c'est important de remettre à sa place comme tes partenaires ou les personnes autour de toi, de la même manière que tu t'attendrais à ce qu'une personne blanche dans son cercle de personnes blanches speak up when they need to speak up. Fait que c'est ça.
Je suis tout à fait d'accord avec toi. Je pense que pour moi, encore une fois, c'est assez évident que dans le monde, genre cis, hétéro, etc., ça a été plutôt la femme light skin, plus mince, versus moi qui est pas light skin, puis je suis pas mince. Mais même dans les relations genre affective, romantique, platonic, friendship, anything, I found that light-skinned people will be very quick to jump on white people's necks, but won't talk amongst themselves. And I'm just like, why is that? It's like, I'm not interested in hearing you say, oh man, look at that corny ass white dude. And I'm like, you corny as fuck too, bro. You corny as hell too. Have you like introspected on your position as a light-skinned person? Like, don't give me the you're black, I'm black. Another thing that I forgot to mention, sometimes we let our friends play off of the tragic mulatto trope a little too much. And for those who don't know what that is, it is a trope that slavery abolitionists came up with in literary fiction to depict white passing people as functioning members of society to enable white people to relate to slaves because of their proximity to whiteness. And the way that translates today is often biracial people will be like, oh, I'm not Black enough for the Black people, I'm not white enough for the white people. And I'm just like, I can't sympathize with that anymore. I really can't, because it's become their personality. No, don't laugh at me, Nene. Don't laugh, because you know that I'm right.
You don't know why I'm laughing. Sometimes when things are true, they hurt and you laugh, man.
Okay, so I was right. You are laughing at this. So
I'm laughing because it's true.
No, man. My thing is, that's very interesting that you think that you need to choose between both worlds. And that you need to act a certain way to belong to either world. What is it about you as a biracial person that you feel you're missing to belong to Blackness? Have you asked yourself that? For any light-skinned people or any white-passing people in the chat that are watching right now, have you ever caught yourself acting out of character in order to prove that you're Black to anybody? And why? Why is that? Because that ultimately is what is telling white people what we think Blackness is.
Mais c'est exactement ça que j'allais dire. C'est vraiment complexe parce que c'est tellement vrai ce que tu dis, mais c'est tellement complexe dans le sens où ça rentre dans ce qui a été dit plus tôt par rapport à qu'est-ce qu'on juge comme étant noir.
And it's so complex because it's like, obviously, between Black diasporic cultures, we have a lot of things in common. Like, I remember when we went to Senegal in 2017, Nika had been there for the first time, and she was discovering all these things in Senegal that, oh, like, this is the same way in Haiti and all that stuff. And like Caribbean folks and African folks and Black folks in the UK and Europe, we have a lot of things in common. We have a lot of social cues in common. That's not untrue. But if you were not raised in that culture, or if you were not accustomed to that culture, don't pretend like, I don't know how to explain it. I just really feel like there are so many things that belong to Black people, but don't belong to every Black person.
What do you mean?
Like, a lot of the times, our social cues, our culture, and all of that stuff, and things that we protect in the name of cultural appropriation, we can understand that this is something that has always been historically Black.
Mm-hmm.
But then we meet a Black person who doesn't know who Oprah is or who hasn't listened to this record from 1970, and all of a sudden we say, how are you Black and you don't XYZ? And it becomes a problem of these people who don't feel Black enough and feel the need to like gain more Black points by doing their homework and studying this and doing that. And it's like, where do we draw the line is my question. Where do we draw the line in perpetuating or enabling the tragic mulatto trope of not feeling Black enough in one world or another, while also being able to protect Blackness to keep from Black fishers or anybody else from being able to co-opt that struggle that isn't theirs?
Yes, and Shanice made this comment on the chat. Well, just another example of something that is like for Black people, but not for all Black people, like AAVE.
There you go. That's exactly what I was saying earlier.
Another
like
example. So yeah.
You can ask Nika. I say nigga about 17 times an hour, okay? But not every Black person is going to, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mais moi, ça me fait me poser une question, tu sais, le colorisme, tu sais, au début, c'est sûr qu'il y a la définition globale de qu'est-ce que le colorisme, mais est-ce qu'on peut limiter le colorisme juste à une question de physique? Je ne sais pas si vous comprenez ce que je veux dire, parce qu'il y a l'aspect de... Tu sais, là, je pousse, mais il y a l'aspect qui est souvent revenu, qu'est-ce qu'on se considère comme étant noir, tu sais? Quel type de comportement qu'on juge comme étant noir? Quel type de comportement qu'une personne va se dire qu'elle doit apporter ou se dire qu'elle doit laisser tomber pour se rapprocher ou pas la négritude ou se rapprocher ou pas de ce qui est considéré comme socially correct, which means plus près du blanc. Je ne sais pas si vous comprenez, vous voyez où est-ce que je veux en venir avec ça. Puis aussi, qu'est-ce que, tu sais, ce que tu as mentionné, Max, par rapport à, tu sais, tu as mentionné rapidement l'appropriation culturelle, puis qu'il y a certains trucs qu'on peut vraiment définir, puis se dire, this is a black thing. Mais il y a aussi tellement de trucs qu'aujourd'hui, on va dire, this is a black thing, qui n'est pas limité, qui est limitatif dans le sens où c'est des trucs qui nous ont été nourris et gavés depuis tellement d'années qu'on a associé ça à being black. But is it really? Mettons, genre, saying nigger, puis genre la tête, puis genre, les comme, yes, ok, yeah, mais c'est... On dirait que ce que j'essaie d'exprimer, c'est qu'il y a tellement différentes manières d'être noir. Puis que déjà, je pense que si de base, on prenait ça, puis on se poserait vraiment sérieusement là-dessus sur qu'est-ce qu'est être noir, puis de comprendre que être noir peut être une multitude de choses, je pense que ça peut vraiment comme affecter d'une manière positive notre relation au colorisme et notre relation à la teinte de peau.
Et juste,
excuse-moi.
Yeah, perfect. I was actually going to ask if like Nene or Kim, si vous vouliez also add up to this conversation. So yeah, go ahead.
I would just say that like, I think that Blackness as a broader category in the world that we live in has been codified in a certain way to be like packaged, distributed, and consumed. And within this idea or concept of like Blackness more broadly, there are specific identities. And I think that what I'm hearing in the latest interventions is when people are not anchored in that specificity of experience, because like nobody is just Black. There's people who are, yes, perceived and understood to be Black and who are, for example, from Brooklyn. Or there's people who are perceived and understood to be Black who have two Haitian parents who are from Ocap or whatever. Like there is a specificity, there's a geopolitical specificity, there's a familial specificity, there's an economic specificity to embody and interact with Blackness. And so I think when people have trouble pinpointing and expressing the specificity of their own experience, they run towards prepackaged ideals and try to like consume, absorb, enact them so that what they themselves have just bought, they can sell back to us. Whereas when you have grown up as a Black person, it is not something for you to buy, or in the situations where you have been forced to sell some version or some portion of your Blackness, it has been to assure your livelihood. And then to go back to the portion about how light-skinned people and or light-skinned femmes can be complicit in colorism, I think that beyond what they say, I think it's also how they exist in relation to dark-skinned people in their lives. First of all, do you believe dark-skinned people, or do you think that we're angry anytime that we say something? Do you listen to dark-skinned people, or do you just feel completely entitled to our emotional labor and get completely confused if we're not performing a therapy role for you? Do you feel some kind of way because your Blackness is not being read in the way that you would like for it to be? And do you feel that your relationship with us and or with one of us is supposed to be a pathway towards the eventual expression of the Blackness that you would like to embody? Yeah. Do you see us as tools? Do you see us as experiences? Or do you see us as people? Have you ever considered showing up for us? What has that looked like? What do you do for the dark-skinned people in your life? Do you think about us beyond the moments when we ask you to be there for us? Do you create conditions under which we feel comfortable asking you to be there for us? these are all things that perpetuate that cycle and that then enable you in conversation with other light-skinned people, with cis-het dark-skinned Black men, to be silent. Because, oh, sorry, my earphones just died. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, on t'entend.
So essentially, it's all of these beliefs and behaviors that enable people to be silent and to once again participate in this idea that dark-skinned people should forever be disappearing. Particularly light-skinned femmes. I've noticed a pattern in the way that light-skinned femmes with a white parent are raised. Oftentimes, you guys are told that you're special. You're told future is going to look like you, that there are going to be more and more people who look like you in the world, and that racism is going to be solved when people have mixed babies. And this has impacted your understanding of race. This has impacted your understanding of Blackness. And this carries into the ways that you relate to us and with us.
Kim, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything else to add. No, everything was said.
Everything was said. Nene had a whole
Everything
ass
was
word. Nene had a whole ass word. And just to add on to what you were saying about light-skinned people and light-skinned femmes and how they use dark-skinned people as a pathway to their own Blackness, consider the times that you have platformed other dark-skinned people in the name of brotherhood, or we're all in this together. Is that how you really feel, or are you doing this to reinforce your own Blackness? Are you doing this to say, see, I'm down with the cause, so obviously I too am Black? And I'm thinking of like Sean King and all these types, where all these light-skinned people who have some weird kind of guilt about their light skin, saying like white guilt and light skin guilt like how tread a lot of the same paths, but no, it's not because you're gonna follow a whole bunch of dark skin influencers and reshare all their stuff that we're gonna know that you're down with the cause, or that you understand what it is that we're going through. If you aren't...
Mike, je m'excuse, pareil que Sean King est blanc, que Shanice te fait dire.
The white man.
No, that's what I'm saying, Shanice. We've been new. This is why Twitter been calling him Talcum X, which I think is hilarious. But that's just it. So I'm just like,
and also like, I just want to say, notice how many like Black celebrities are still like promoting everything that Sean King says. Like everybody, like Black Twitter, everybody has caught on to the fact that Sean King is a scam. But somehow Black celebrities like who live in Hollywood and like all of like they don't know, and you're like, wait, but like you see something happening, and then like the next thing you see is them posting some shit with Sean King, and you're like, but...
And so much of that
knows.
And so much of that is because of what Sean King has quote unquote done for the community, which is why you have people like Rachel Dolezal and all these blackfishing academics and even people in Montreal who find their legitimacy as Black activists, or quote unquote Black if they're not actually Black. But what I'm saying is they're trying to platform themselves as proponents of Black liberation by using dark-skinned people as pawns. And it's like, okay, but you're still the face of the movement, so to speak. So what are you actually doing for us?
And I'd like to say super quickly that these people perpetuate the myth that you have to be Black to care about like
also that like you don't have to pretend to be Black to care about Black people. Which is what I just don't like.
Mais ça rend tellement ça.
And that's also why it's because like they're like the motive is not because you care about Black people. It's because you understand that like pretending that you care about Black people comes with benefits because you are not Black. You know what I mean? Like because you are not Black, everything that you rip is only going to be beneficial to you. There is never going to be something that is going to keep you from accessing wealth beauty, love, acts nothing. There is everything for you is positive.
No, everybody wants to be black till it's time to be black.
Shit.
Shit. What to add on that? Yeah. Est-ce qu'il y aurait, je pense qu'on a fait le tour de cette question. It was all really, really well answered et amené d'autres. Est-ce qu'il y aurait eu comme une autre question? Je pense qu'on a le temps pour deux dernières questions. Plutôt une, je pense, étant donné qu'on répond vraiment in-depth.
Wow! OK, non, je peux pas lire ça.
That's a proper one. OK, so Myriam demande, nous avons des personnes light skin à Montréal. Ça finit avec un haha très genre, j'ai hâte de lire ça. nous avons des personnes light skin à Montréal dans les médias, dans l'académique, dans les arts, dans les militantismes, etc., qui ont le monopole de la parole concernant les luttes anti-négrophobes. Exact, c'est vrai, Myriam avait posé cette question un peu plus tôt. Donc, perso, je crois que c'est pas aux personnes light skin d'être à l'avant, surtout en majorité dans les luttes contre l'anti-blackness. So, pour les personnes qui partagent cette opinion, avez-vous des suggestions d'actions pour recadrer, replacer les personnes light skin dans nos luttes en arrière-plan?
Ben, je dirais comme les confronter, genre, je dirais comme les confronter directement les personnes, genre de dire comme, écoute, genre, prends un arrière-plan, prends une position d'arrière-plan, parce que comme, je compte vraiment pas sur les personnes light skin, sur elles de se dire elles-mêmes, genre, oh, ok, je vais partir. Et surtout que comme si ces personnes-là qui le font, c'est toujours, ça va toujours être dans une position de, même si c'est pas volontaire, accidentellement, parce que la société est faite comme ça, vu quand eux-mêmes ils vont genre mettre sur leur plateforme genre oh je me désiste, it's going to be beneficial for them. You know what I mean? It's
like being public about deplatforming yourself.
It always do. It's like you always seen as the good savior person, even if you come out as actually you've been like taking so much from us and stealing so much from us. Mais genre le fait que tu vas te positionner toi-même que OK, je vais partir. OK, tu vas partir. Tous les followers et tout ça, ils vont partir avec toi parce que they only followed it because of your presentation, because you wore that face. So
c'est tellement vrai ce que tu dis en plus. Wow.
C'est vraiment parce que OK, beaucoup de choses là-dessus. Moi, ça va peut-être aller dans une autre direction. Moi, je considère que c'est mieux que, par exemple, c'est mieux qu'il y ait quelqu'un qu'il n'y ait personne. Là, il y a deux trucs par rapport à ça. Il y a quelqu'un qui a son micro ouvert, que j'entends la musique. Oh, Shanice! Shanice, c'est toi.
Merci.
Merci. Je pense qu'il y a deux niveaux je vais apporter deux niveaux que je vois à cette question-là. La place qu'on accorde aux personnes. Parce que moi, je connais une personne personnelle. Je connais personnellement, j'ai une amie qui occupe beaucoup de place publiquement dans le domaine des arts. Puis on a déjà eu, qui est une personne, she's mixed race, puis on a déjà eu ce genre de conversation. Puis il y a beaucoup de qui vont permettre d'avoir cette place. Les personnes qui ont le pouvoir de donner la place, à qui ils vont donner la place? Déjà, il y a ça. Déjà, de deux, oui, je suis d'accord de l'affaire de comme se désister et tout, mais il y a une question de pourquoi tu te désistes? Parce que si tu fais juste genre non, je me désiste parce que blablabla, genre oui, ça dépend des motivations, puis de vraiment... Je trouve que ce qui serait important des personnes qui occupent cette place, j'ai l'impression de rien dire. Ce que je trouve important, des personnes qui occupent cette place parce que c'est à elles qu'on l'a donné puis qui l'ont accepté, c'est aussi de parler ouvertement de ce que ça représente d'être light skin puis d'occuper cette place-là. Fait que moi, je suis plus d'un point de vue, les mettre en arrière, peut-être pas. En fait, peut-être pas. Je suis pas d'accord avec ça, mais je suis d'accord avec le fait que il y a beaucoup de personnes qui prennent beaucoup de place. Je trouve que c'est plus une question d'équilibrer la place qui est prise. Puis aussi, les personnes qui occupent cette place-là, les personnes light-skin qui occupent cette place-là, d'être à 100% honnêtes par rapport à ce que ça représente d'occuper cette place-là.
Oui.
Puis pourquoi vous acceptez cette place-là? Puis si tu veux mentionner que cette place-là devrait revenir à quelqu'un d'autre, pourquoi cette place-là devrait revenir à quelqu'un d'autre? C'est de ne pas prendre toute la charge de ce qu'est vivre de la négrophobie ou vivre dans un monde de racisme systémique sur ses épaules et de surtout pas se poser en position de comme porte-parole de. Ça en particulier, se permettre la place de porte-parole, ça, je trouve ça nocif. D'occuper la place en tant que telle, non. Tout dépend de comment tu le fais and how honest are you about it. And being honest, je trouve que c'est important de pas juste être honnête par rapport à toi, mais être publiquement honnête. Parce que, tu sais, mettons, Kim avait mentionné followers and stuff. OK, oui, tes followers, ils te suivent toi. Justement, une des raisons pour laquelle c'est d'autant plus important d'être honnête publiquement, tu sais.
Ouais. Puis, ben, je suis entièrement d'accord et je voudrais dire que there's a difference between like representation and transformation. And sometimes, you know, people who are closer to whiteness are chosen to occupy spaces of dialogue with people who are in power because there's an assumption that it'll be easier for the people in power to listen to them, to negotiate with them, etc. But this very act of being in negotiation with a like white power structure is a reformist act. So it's an act that supposes that this power structure will continue to exist, that we cannot imagine a future in which this power structure crumbles. And in order to survive, we have to insert ourselves in it. So for me, a lot of people who are involved in that struggle are involved in a different struggle than I am. And so I don't know that there's anything that I could say to them that would produce like some kind of seismic change where all of a sudden we're reaching for the same thing. So, you know, some people, this feels healing to some people. Je suis pas dans la vie de tout le monde, je sais pas ce que les gens veulent. Mais pour moi, c'est pas ce que je cherche. C'est pas ce que je cherche. Genre, je cherche pas comme que l'université prenne genre 45 profs noirs, là, puis qu'on puisse avoir genre je sais pas trop quoi. Je cherche pas que comme on ait un premier ministre noir et puis que ça s'appelle encore le Québec, puis que ça s'appelle encore le Canada et puis que on chante Kumbaya. Genre, je sais pas. Je suis pas
I mean, that's what everybody thought was going to happen when we voted for Obama. We said Obama's the first black president. Everything going to change.
We said Sasha. We said it's not true that black people don't let dogs in the house.
It's like
they got themselves a hypoallergenic dog, and we're breaking all the stereotypes.
It's like, yeah, he's black, but it's still like the United States of America still exists as a conquering empire. So what does it really mean to have a black president?
Exactly.
Ça, c'est difficile. Je trouve ça difficile, ça, parce que autant t'as l'individu, mais t'as le système aussi.
Yeah.
There's so much one person can do.
Yes, I completely agree in this. And at the same time, I'm saying that, you know, individuals who are super invested in the system and whose dream time and dream space is occupied by a future in which the system is upheld are people who want something very different from what I want.
OK, je comprends ce que tu veux dire. I hear you.
Parce que moi, tu sais, je suis en train de parler à quelqu'un qui pense que dans 50 ans, dans 100 ans, ça va encore s'appeler le Canada, ben, on a fini notre conversation. On n'a pas vraiment quoi que ce soit d'important à se dire dans ce contexte-là.
Yeah. One last question, parce qu'il nous reste genre 12 minutes. Donc, dernière question, puis on va comme conclure très rapidement ensuite. Donc, c'est une question de... Oh, sorry.
Il y avait la question de Shanice.
C'est exactement cette question. Exactly that question. Donc, Shanice, en fait, Excusez-moi, Shanice, not Janice. Shanice, qui aimerait, ben, comme, I would really like to hear people's answer to what does white passing mean if classification of race is based on phenotype.
Based of what?
Phénotype, les phénotypes, ben, comme la peau, mais les phénotypes, ça inclut
Like
aussi
features.
Like
les
hair,
cheveux,
like,
les lèvres,
texture,
le nez.
Ok, je comprends.
Donc, vraiment, qu'on parle comme de, c'est ça, de white passing means if classification of race is based on.
Ben, je vous pose Mariah Carey. Do we claim her or no? Because
we don't.
Ben voilà ta réponse.
We don't. Mais non, mais attends, c'est pas juste ça la réponse. C'est pas juste ça la réponse.
Non, je niais. Because I was coming to a point because, like, for example, this.
Wait, hold up.
Qu'est-ce que tu dis, Kim?
Saying something.
We should ease into this. T'as commencé hardcore là.
No, mais because, for example, this summer when the uprising of Black Lives Matter returned with, you know, George Floyd, etc. I saw a lot of racially ambiguous, i.e. white passing celebrities do something that I hadn't really seen before. I'm talking about like Halsey. I'm talking about like, I don't know if anybody follows Snitchery. She's like a cosplay makeup artist and things like that. And these are people who have constantly been questioned about their ethnicity and been accused of blackfishing because Snitchery is very pale but has big lips. And then Halsey did that, what was it, tri-bi thing, the biracial, bisexual, bipolar or something. It was super weird, super problematic. But what they did in this instance is that they used their platform and their privilege to speak out against anti-Black violence without claiming it for themselves is something that I found was interesting. It wasn't so much a matter of, I'm Black too, and I understand the suffering. It was like, I know my place. I have Black family. This is not my fight, but I'm going to use my platform to elevate who are actually
ça revient exactement à ce que je disais tantôt.
I was like,
Also, I have something to say also about the Mariah Carey story because somebody just came in talking about Mariah. I almost done with her biography. It's very problematic for white passing people because some white passing people don't give a damn. They enjoy the privilege of this white passing because they don't have to go through the violence of like being, you know, basically legal everywhere that they go. But in the case of Mariah, I feel like there is another type of white passing people. They have a really big conflict with their identity inside because even they come from a Black and white family, also in America in the 70s. I feel like in a way, she always been trying to claim this space. The problem is it's just like when white passing people try to take allyship with no Black white passing people. That's when the complications come because they only show up when there is a nugget for them. So in the case of Mariah, I feel like she has been...
This is why I did not want to talk about Mariah because I thought that this was going to go somewhere I did not want to go. Let's go, let's move on. Let's not...
I agree. I need to talk for Mariah for a second. Like,
why are you now talking about Mariah? See, now we open about Mariah. Let's stop talking.
Let's continue
like a super fast topic. I don't know if like you discussed it. I got disconnected for a second, but I put it in the chat about it.
But let's just maybe continue the conversation and like a lot of people like make comments in the chat, and so we can also like get on that and just add it to the conversation. But let's just continue because we really don't have like much time left. So let's just continue and let the panelists answer. And yeah, continue. Nene putting on the
talk about that one drop rule without talking about specifically Mariah. You know what I mean? We can talk about like what we feel about the one drop rule without drawing it to Mariah. You know what I mean?
That's why I was not going to speak specifically about Mariah.
My bad. I felt that like we collaborated into making this into much bigger than what it was.
No, for sure. I definitely am talking about people who do not navigate the world as Black but have immediate Black family members Like there's somebody else in Montreal who is not white passing, but passes as something else completely, but claims the hardship of their Black, I don't know, grandmother or something as reason as to why they can say the N-word. And I'm just like, that's not how that works, I don't think. And I'd like to know what your opinions are on that. Like claiming the hardship related to Blackness that you yourself do not suffer.
I think so. To go back to the original question of like, I think that personally, it's really, I really just like relate like Blackness to like what you like what you look like, and to that point, I really also want to say that like there's a lot of light-skinned people. I mean, and also like when I say like, sorry, let me say there's a lot of mixed race like Black people that like look like you like have like very kind of like European kind of like features or whatever you want to call it, or just like look like a little less, like a little bit more ambiguous. But like there's like a lot of like mixed race Black people who you are visibly Black, you know, from like their features, but like the light skin, their hair like maybe a certain texture, but like you can very visibly tell that they're Black. And I think that like that for me is, I feel that like that for me is like it's like for me like it's undeniable. Like you navigate. It's undeniable that you navigate places and spaces in a way that like is very similar. It's very closer to my experience as like a Black person than like another mixed race Black person who is closer in like what they look like to maybe looking like a white person than they do a Black person. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what it relates to, like, to answer the question that like Shanice was asking. I think that like for me, like, yeah, like there is like, it's very, like the whole like one drop rule thing, like was like, it was about like, it was like, it happened during slavery. Like it was so people could like create more slaves, like, so they could enslave more people. So it's like these are very different times. Like we don't live these times anymore. Mm-hmm. So like this whole thing of like saying that like, oh, just because my great grandmother is Black, now I can go around and say nigga, like, no, I don't think that works.
Having the Black ancestry means something different now, because back then it was almost like being a dog. You know, if you have a certain kind of blood in you, that's what you are. But today, because Blackness is related to a certain social capital, it's no longer about what your pedigree is, but what you can do with the social capital related to Blackness, right? And so that's why I think it's so bizarre that people who do not navigate the world as Black have this, again, the tragic, not even the tragic mulatto thing, because it's like, it's even to another level. There was another article about somebody, like this redheaded, green-eyed woman who says, yes, I too am a white passing Black woman, talking about like one of these people that came out. And it's like, I also suffer because of my Blackness. And it's hard for me to hear racist comments from people who think I'm one of them, but they don't know that I'm actually Black. And I'm like, if you can hear the racist comments because they don't think you're Black, what do you think that means? You are not the one suffering. You are suffering on behalf of people you know. It's not your personal suffering. You just feel bad, but you don't feel insulted. You just feel bad for people that you're related to. So it's not a racism that you are actually experiencing. It's the same thing as white people who have Black friends who say, oh, it sucks when like my racist uncle talks about, you know, Black people this way. It's like, why don't you say something then? It's not like you're experiencing the racism.
J'écoute parce que je trouve ça vraiment intéressant, mais comme j'ai vraiment de la misère avec cette question précise et certaines choses. I'm processing all of it, puis j'ai vraiment de la misère. Je me sens inconfortable à comment je pourrais dire ça? En tant qu'individu, à qualifier qu'est-ce qui entre dans le Blackness ou pas. C'est sûr qu'il y a beaucoup de choses sur lesquelles on peut tous s'entendre, mais j'aimerais revenir sur we don't experiment the same experience?
What?
Merci. The same racism. Parce que, like, even though you're light skinned, moi, je considère que even though you're light skinned, even though you're dark skinned, you're still black.
Mm-hmm.
Puis il faut pas aussi oublier le contexte. Like, you're light skinned dans quel contexte aussi.
Mm-hmm.
Tu sais, j'ai un ami qui est super, qui est mixed race, qui est light skin, mais qui a grandi, je pense, comme à Québec, qui se faisait battre, genre, à tous les jours à l'école, because he was black.
Mm-hmm.
But he's light skin. Genre, dans la vie, il va définitivement profiter des privilèges qui viennent avec ça. Fait est-ce que son blackness est moindre du fait qu'il soit light
non,
skin?
justement. Et je suis d'accord avec toi, mais c'est pas de ça que je parle. Moi, je parle du fait que la personne en question, eux-mêmes, n'ont jamais vécu un racisme anti-noir. Mais they witness people being racist or saying racist things, and they feel like that's an attack on them. It's like they're talking about Black people this way, and I feel hurt because it's like, oh, if they knew I was Black, then what would they think of me? But because I look the way I do, they're not going to treat me like a Black person.
I hear what you're saying.
C'est ça ma question.
Shanice just brought up the fact that I'm just going to read Shanice's comments. I also feel like this question/convo always leads into light skin versus dark skin, but white passing is a different context. This is not about light-skinned Black people. We're always getting in their feelings, and I agree.
I'm gonna just let y'all finish your sentences, but I'm so sorry. It is now 8:15. So ça serait, mais en même temps, like, because it's also depending on y'all, like, if you still have the capacity to keep going and you want to continue this conversation, and you're comfortable with just like maybe an extra, I don't know, like, you want to finish on that topic and then we finish, okay? But it is indeed 15. So...
Quelqu'un a dit part 2.
Guys, je peux pas parce que je fais un IG live là, Exchange Fruits tantôt, fait que...
Ouais, moi aussi, je vais call it a night.
Perfect. So, well, this conversation clearly is not finished.
It's not today.
Yeah, I would just say like real quick so that we ended on a note where we are actually like centering ourselves and we didn't come here to like talk about light-skinned people. I completely agree with what Shanice is saying, and I think that there should be space and time to address that, and the fact that the conversation is systemically derailed is part of the problem. And I'd like to know what our moderator and what each panelist are going to do for themselves tonight after exiting this call, to care for themselves and to exist in a world in which us dark-skinned people exist in the future.
That's a whole word. I don't even know. I got so much shit to do today. I don't know.
Bon, ben, pendant que tu réfléchis, moi, je vais répondre. Moi, je vais... ben là... Moi, je vais écouter Vampires versus the Bronx.
True! You right.
Qui sort ce soir.
Cat, c'est ce soir.
En buvant du lait, du chocolat chaud. En fumant des battes.
J'ai même pas réalisé que ça sortait ce soir. Wow.
C'est ce soir.
Damn. I need to check that out too. I'm gonna let the others answer parce que j'ai toujours pas de réponse.
Kim, do you want to answer?
I just got some food.
There you go. Somebody can order me some food. I think somebody should just
want to order me some food too.
I think somebody should order all the panelists and the moderator at least one plate of food.
Oh my God! Oui.
There we go.
But just finish Kim like what she was gonna say, you know.
Oh yeah, y'all should do that. I already did it myself because I do that. And yeah, I'm just gonna eat this food. Yeah, and just like keep smoking this joint and then maybe watch something. I don't know.
Vampires versus the Bronx.
This is so fun though. I love this. This was really like
necessary.
Yes, exactly. Like, it just gave me this.
You're right.
You gave me this, Kim. Your energy is so like.
This wasn't even our panel. This was just Nene's TED Talk, to be honest.
Yo.
To be honest.
I second that. I was just like.
That was their talk.
Let me mute it.
Let me mute my. Like.
On that though, Nene, do you want to answer your own question?
Shut it down.
No, because I've just been accused of having a TED Talk, so I'd love to hear from other people. Thank you very much.
Oh, mais la Nene, arrête.
The way it's been used. Well, I'm just gonna say thank you for being there. Like, c'était vraiment une conversation hyper intéressante. Clairement, on a besoin d'un part 2. Clairement, comme on a besoin d'aller encore plus, justement, dig encore plus up sur le sujet. Moi, je vais aller regarder le show de Fenty en espérant que il y a Savage Fenty, il y a drop aujourd'hui. So, en espérant qu'il y ait plus, because I mean, I love the show last year, but I was like, I thought I was going to see more Black people, you know. So, hopefully, comme il y en aura encore plus, et je yes. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing to enjoy and smoke my J's as well.
Thank you, Shakun, Kim, Nene, Myriam. Merci à Fruition Mtl pour l'invitation. C'était vraiment le fun. J'espère sincèrement qu'on se fasse un part 2 parce que je pense qu'on a beaucoup de choses à dire qu'on n'a pas pu dire. Et puis, this was really lovely to be in the presence of all these dark-skinned geniuses. And I hope to do this again soon. And I do hope that everybody takes care of themselves tonight. I think everybody should drop their Venmo, Cash App, e-transfer, whatever it is, because y'all definitely earn that shit. I'm serious.
Yeah, c'est vrai. No, c'est vrai.
I'm serious. And for anybody who wants to tune in, Strange Fruits is in fact doing an Instagram live from the Slut Island Instagram. So if you want a bit of levity, some crate digging, some music, some nonsense, that's happening in 9 minutes. So.
Can you drop the link
Absolutely
on the chat?
Yes.
So everybody can copy paste it before the conversation, before the session ends?
Yes.
Perfect. So it's on the chat. People copy paste it, go get connected. Thank you for being there. Thank you for showing up, for your questions, for your comments on the chat. It was really nice. And yeah, have a great night. Be blessed. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
Merci.
I'll leave the whole session open for like still 10 minutes. So if people want to continue like dropping like whatever, saying their highs, buys, whatever, do it. In 10 minutes, I'm gonna close it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bisous.
Merci tout le monde. Bye.
Merci. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, non, mais je veux voir les faces des gens avant de partir. I want to see your faces.
Turn on your cameras for those who want to.